Story 1. Eternal Woman. In the middle of the day's garden stands this four-storied cadaver of a building. Years ago, it was home to many residents. A couple of families, a few students, and some retirees. Now the house is nothing more than a decrepit panorama for bleak clouds. Wild toad flax spreads through the splintered masonry, covering its windows with ladylike fingers. Some branches diffuse through cracks in windows. Others back upwards across the roof tiles, dangling on the other side like marionettes, ornamenting this somber palette of ossified colors. The house has lulled itself to sleep with memories of its past, not even disturbed by thuds of dry acorns on the cracked, cemented path. Time has stopped here. Every now and then curious passers-by press their foreheads against the rusty gates of the garden, desperately squinting through the mist. None dare to climb over and enter. You two have been passing by, peeking through the gates, wondering about the empty garden and the house. And, like everyone else, you'd never dared to enter until now. With your face pressed against the gates, you notice something in one of the second-floor windows. It's a speck of light, a really tiny one. You cup your hands and squint through the mist. And there it is again. What is that all about, you wonder, after all? The house has been abandoned for 30 years now, and, to your knowledge, no one set foot inside ever since. That's when curiosity finally prevails over apprehension and common sense. And so you make that decision. You look around to make sure no one is watching you. You climb on top of the gate, carefully make your way above its Gothic serration, then jump 7 feet down on the cemented path of the garden. The light in the window still shimmers, flashing its gaze like a beacon from an abandoned lighthouse. Slowly you make your way along the forking path through the garden, towards the house. Your steps are quiet and soft, as if you're trying not to wake a sleeping banshee. You pass by the fountain bench, noticing some random penchants of the past. A book that must have been left by a scatterbrained resident, a gardener glove tucked between moldy pebbles. The ghastly mist disperses as you reach the entrance of the house. You stomp your feet to shake juniper needles off your shoes, and that's when you hear it. It's the house cringing in its sleep. As you put your foot on the first stair, you can feel it breathe faster and shift eyelids side to side. It must be finally noticing your presence. Second stair, and the house no longer reacts to squeaks, but only shivers with its myriads of entangled spider webs. Like a comatose patient, it momentarily opens its eyes, gapes around with multiple eye sockets, then falls back into vegetative slumber. 1 flight of stairs, and the door to your left is the one you need. It's not locked. You try to push, and after a few tries the door finally huffs and gives in. Swarms of microscopic dust spakes perform pirouettes around you in all directions before fading from sight, beckoning you, the intruder, to enter this sanctuary presided by darkness. You hesitate, but you step in. You light a match, and molecules of light bounce off the walls, revealing the long corridor, seemingly longer than the building itself. How? Oh, wait, there's another door to your left. You try the knob, but it's locked. Next to the door you notice a coat rack with nothing on it but a little headscarf. Then, to your right, you see what looks like a kitchen with a bathroom pod and piles of some debris. Don't go in there, just keep on walking straight. The corridor soon ends, and you come face to face with a wide set of double doors. This time you open them with ease. Welcome to the living room. Whatever sunlight penetrates through the dappled window is not enough for you to see anything. you light another match and look around. You see rows of books with eroded titles stacked on shelves. Then further down, an open piano looking like a smiling imbecile with missing front teeth. Then a carcass of what once was a desk with random wood planks covering its frame, a sooty glass vase, an armchair facing the other way. Wait, you think you see someone. Sitting in that armchair, you hold your breath. Who's there? You whisper, taking cautious sideways steps. You walk around, maintaining a distance of few feet between yourself and the figure in the armchair. You can hear your own heart pounding against your chest cage. Trickles of sweat run down your brows, and you don't notice the match burning your fingertips. You twitch and lick your finger. You pick your last match. Yes, only one left in the matchbox. You nervously rub it against the side of your matchbox 3 or 4 times, until it finally draws aerial hues in the air. As the sulfur light once again illuminates the living room, you find yourself standing right in front of that someone. That someone is still sitting in the armchair. That someone is looking right at you. That someone is me. I am a girl about 6 or 7 years old. I live here. Those are my books, and that vase belongs to me, too. I tried learning piano once, only to be driven away by its constant throaty mocking of my poor skills. I gave up, and now the piano is nothing but a quiet observant to my daily routine. Speaking of routine, it consists of seating in this old armchair, leaning my palms on the armrest, swooning in and out of existence. My whole existence is in waiting. Who do I wait for? I wait for her, the elderly woman who lives in the other room. I wait for her to call upon me, and so I sit and I stare the dim window, looking from the rear side of the building. There are trees that grow there, and from time to time I see blotchy spakes of sunlight slicing through the evergreen maze of conifers. Other than that, nothing is happening, no visitors and no occasional intruders. Only in my imagination, including you, evening creeps in, drawing strange gallows on the ceiling. When it gets darker, I hear thousands of voices oscillating through the corridor and the room, and the imbecile piano, and the armchair, the voices, cognizant of my presence, to intensify like a pendulum in reverse motion, calling me by my name. These are the voices of the yore, of places and sounds and smells, names long forgotten, eclipsing slowly like smoldering grass. This quiet peace is only disturbed by the clamor of dripping faucet in the kitchen every hour, and pacing of the elderly woman in the adjacent room. She paces from one corner to another. I dare not enter her room, not until she calls me. And that's when I suddenly hear it. First it sounds like a distant there it is again, this time a bit more pronounced. I move towards the door of my sanctuary, my living room. I stand by the doorstep, and I hear it again, this time much clearer. Child, that cannot be a mistake. It's her. Goodbye, piano. Goodbye, armchair. Goodbye, books. I float down the corridor, gently caressing the ceiling with my hair. As I come closer to the bedroom, the voice resonates with overlaying echoes like this: cheat, chi, child, and dormant echoes retort to her in their peculiar unison. The door to her bedroom is locked, but it isn't locked for me. I open, and I float into her room, hovering above the floor like an apparition. Faint light from a lantern situated on a knit stand is enough to only uncover a few feet of the room, and one may wonder if this is the same light that beacons through the window, inviting adventurous intruders. As I enter the old woman's room, I gaze through the sumptuously furnished room, down the arabesque wall tapestry with arching necks of draped chandeliers. I've never been here before, and my childish curiosity takes over. Below the tattered decorations of oval coving, I notice old photographs hung on manifold nooks. The aura above the lantern gives some unwanted colors to the otherwise black and white photographs. I notice Sao inscriptions in the corner of each photograph. I try to read it first, but I hear a voice reading it for me. Jacob F. Haynes. I turn to the far corner of the room where the voice came from. It must be her, the elderly woman sitting in the armchair in the dark corner of the room. Jacob F. Haynes, says the voice again. That's the name of the photographer, the person who took that photo. The first photograph on the right was taken in March of 1932. Me and my brother Henry, the very year he died. We grew up in a much larger house by the Delmar Gardens off Morgan Street, a big patio with, there's that patio and that photograph to the left. Her croaky sentences finally cease, and I can feel her shivering stare through the brown darkness. I can hear her taking loud sips of breath between words like ebb and tide of an ancient ocean. If I take another step, I will see her face. But she stops me and commands to take a seat on the ottoman. My name is Ariadne, she says. I was only 9 when Henry died. She pauses to repel the sudden onslaught of painful memories, then takes a deep breath and slowly goes on. Henry, my brother Henry, was always an ill boy, but before the Great Depression hit, it was not something we worried about. Father's business was blooming. We had access to the best specialists. We had enough money for expensive prescriptions. Then the Great Depression came, and the businesses that we owned slowly but surely went up in smokes. The photograph in the upper left, yes, that one. It's my father in front of our old house. We sold it the next year. I cry. So did Mother, even when she tried to soothe me. That is when we moved here, to the second-floor apartment in this residential building. This is my room, mine and Henry's. He slept right there, exactly at the same spot where those photographs are. While we tried to make ends meet, his disease only got worse. Doctors gave it a medical name, polio. Other doctors gave it a scary nickname, plague of the century. And they told my father that Henry had to be hospitalized. Henry died on Christmas Day. His body, weakened from numerous childhood illnesses, could not withstand another challenge. He was lucky. I knew he was. Others like him that I saw in the hospital lived on. Children of his age, some older, some younger. They were being placed in wooden boxes where nurses stimulated their lungs to breathe. They called it iron lungs. It was supposed to save them, but it only inflicted more pain. Henry never went through that. He was lucky. He died peacefully on Silent Night. She stops. Again, emotions must have combed through her throat, weakening tongue muscles for a moment. But she knows she has very little time left, and her words like columns of blind men meander towards me, never breaking formation. That photograph in the middle is of me and my mother in 1944 at the train station. Few days after we received the Western Union telegram from Adjutant General, who was deeply saddened to inform us that my father, who was previously reported missing in action, was killed in Holland. The day after we received the death telegram, I informed my mother that I was joining the military. She did not try to dissuade me. I remember her look, like an abyss staring back at you. We stood at the train station and posed for one final photo for 30 cents. That photo right there. And then I was off on a train to the naval base in Newfoundland. Then across the Atlantic to tread on the battlegrounds where my father fought once. Military nurse, Army Nurse Corps, blue khaki olive uniforms. Then the war was over. That photograph below. That's me in Paris, 1945, late spring. Flowers that they used to sell only on Rue de Lyon. His door with the cowbell ring that made me laugh. I can hear it. That putrid stench of the nearby canal, I can smell it. The loaves he baked for me with shelled peas, he called it pour pain. I can taste it. And the way he looked at me, and I came by their family bakery and rang that cowbell and asked for another pour pain and the secret signal that only he and I shared. I cherished it. The alcove where we met under the pillows of lilac, and my name that he pronounced so funny, Ariadne, it made me smile. The letters we wrote to each other with those strange curves he would put above vowels that made his handwriting so special, and then our dreams, our funny dreams that whirled in the air, tap-danced on monastery towers, before dispersing in the lagoon sky. She looks at the tall clock on the other side of the room. It doesn't work, she knows that, but old reflexes are hard to break. She coughs and hollow echoes play parrot with her. 1947. The photograph on the top right. Me back in this apartment, after 3 years of being away. Like a pebble thrown in the air. I came back to say goodbye to Mother. That tumor they found in her skull was supposed to keep her alive for only 1 month, enough for me to come back and lay her down to rest. She lived for 2 years. It was just the two of us in this apartment, me and her tumor. We shared our days in this room, sometimes walking downstairs and glistening under the fountain in the garden, me reading, tumor nodding and asking me for a release. I refused to grant one. Tumor understood and obeyed. I spoke to the apathy in her eyes and to the tumor. The fountain water would occasionally splash dead mosquitoes on her gray dress. I wiped them. From time to time she tried to talk, but that sounded only like croaking followed by a gasping cough and drooling. My 1-month return home turned into 2 years, which then turned into a lifetime. I stayed by her side all that time, and I stayed when she passed on, and I stayed thereafter. 1959, that photograph right there, yes, oily and yellow. The last photograph of me, the last photograph of this building, while it was still alive. A few years before that I managed to buy the building from previous owners for a very cheap price. They wanted to sell it quickly, and frankly, no one was interested in buying an old, decrepit house. No one but me. Little by little, all residents have moved out. You can see the house in the background in that photograph. Only our window is lit, others dark. Like an eternal pendulum, I remain the soul-beating heart of the house. Hollow echoes of the room cough harder, turning the moribund space into a compilation of sibilating blasts. She plays parrot with them. I am sensing the end. Child, come closer, closer, closer. She is lifting the sateen veil off her face, and for a moment stares into the emptiness of the room with memories curling up like corals of white smoke, then drifting towards me. I catch them all. I am gliding right above her. I am imbibing her memories. I am an infant popping soap bubbles. Her last thoughts are pulsating like concluding baritone of the tall clock, pushing into its final slow-motion ticks. I can hear her time. It plays with musical notes on her faces, hops between waves onto the parched shells of her lips, toes with the crest of her wrinkles, then gyres upwards with hissing sighs. I come closer, 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 until my curls become hers, until my young body and hers become one. Her voice, her face, and that empty apathy in her eyes turns into a childish curiosity. Blooming flowers desolate the raptured skin like a warm spring. Rain after a dry winter, the world is new again. The house takes its last breath and dies. The elderly woman's head rests on the armchair. They die together, and the speck of light slowly floats out of her chest towards me. I reach out, and I catch it. The speck of light, the same one that you, the intruder, saw moments ago behind the gate. The same light that ignited your curiosity and made you climb over the gates, through the misty garden, down the forking paths to the staircase upstairs to the apartment, through the corridor to this very room, only to find nothing in here. By then I will be already gone. I will have already bid my farewell to the dead house, and parted with the garden, and the gates, and the needled junipers, and the derelict fountain. I am outside the gates now. I stride merrily down the street to the market square on my way to the new life. I am ready to live again. I am alive. My name is Ariadne. I am 6 or 7, story 2. 11 rules for idiots. Who bought a haunted house? Well, you really screwed up this time, didn't you? You found a gnarly deal on a beautiful home that almost seemed to be true, and you jumped at it. And now that you're all moved in, you've started to notice some anomalies. You know the type, the spooky-dooky anomalies of the supernatural persuasion. Bumps in the night, doors opening and closing by themselves, auditory hallucinations of voices and whispers. It's more common than you may think, but not everyone realizes the danger. These signs could be proof that some forsaken lost souls inhabit your property. Maybe the previous grandmother self-immolated in the attic. Maybe dear old dad went suddenly insane and repainted the house with the blood of his children, or mom tried seducing demons in the basement. If this sounds even vaguely familiar to you, and you're looking to the good old internet for help, then you've come to the right place. You see, I have this friend. Well, had this friend named Nathan. A couple months back, Nathan found a house for sale in southern Georgia. It was nestled along a remote stretch of woods just outside of Waycross. It was a historical area, an old colonial-style home just under 5,000 square feet, 6-bed, 6-bath with white picket fences and a dozen acres. The quintessential American dream house by all accounts. The price was unbelievably low, but after Nathan contacted the real estate agent, he found that the price that he had seen listed was indeed the price that was being asked. For most people, I imagine this would have raised some pretty big red flags. But Nathan was an idiot, the confident type of idiot that believed machismo is substantial for conquering all of life's obstacles. I know it's not kind to speak ill of the dead like that, spoiler alert, but I'm just trying to give an accurate portrayal of the kind of person Nathan was. You know, the alpha male who hits on your girlfriend, lives at the gym, and probably spanks his meat to his own selfies. For people like Nathan, Friend is really just another word for ego reinforcer. He was cocky and often let pride get the better of him. His wife Janelle was actually my ex-girlfriend from a while back. Bit of a skank, but practically a supermodel. They had 2 kids, Natalie and Mason, who were both spoiled brats again. I'm just trying to give an honest perspective of them in hopes that we may all learn something from what happened. You see, what happened to Nathan, which I'll get into later, was something which I believe could have been easily avoided if only he had followed a few simple instructions. After the funeral, I got to pondering on the matter and realized that what we all really need is a set of rules to follow if you believe your house is haunted. Let's begin. Rule number 1. When looking to purchase or rent a house, always ask for the history. Odds are if a house is being offered at way below market value, and there is a very good reason for it being that way. Nathan didn't do this and thought that the undermarket price was simply the universe handing him something he didn't really earn, as it often seemed to do. Nathan jumped at the offer, and within a few weeks, he and his family were approved to begin moving in. I volunteered to help them move in, and I'll be honest, the house was absolutely gorgeous. Things were great for them at first, but Nathan soon started noticing some odd occurrences. It started with this knocking sound that seemed to reverberate all over the home at odd hours. He said he could never seem to pinpoint where it was coming from, and it never seemed to originate from the same place twice. Eventually, he just chalked it up to the house settling, but that was just the beginning. Rule number 2. Trust your gut. Your home is the last place you should feel uncomfortable. If you get that inkling of discomfort in the back of your mind that never seems to fully dissipate, pay attention to it. It's probably your subconscious trying to warn you. Nathan tried ignoring these sounds, told his wife that it was just normal or the wind, and comforted his children when they felt scared. He had 2 dogs, Rusty and Sailor, both of them black labs, and both seemed to become very anxious after moving in. Nathan did his best to get medication to help the dogs relax, but it didn't seem to help much. That brings us to rule number 3. Along with your gut, you should also trust your pets. Animals have instincts far greater than humans. It's been said that man is the only creature who will sense danger and still wander into it. Animals have a sense for the supernatural. Dogs and cats in particular. If you find them growling at what appears to be nothing or constantly staring into specific areas of the house, then pay attention to that. Odds are they can see something you can't. Nathan told me that Rusty, the older of the 2 dogs, would pace the hall each night for hours. He said it was like he was standing guard over something. On more than one occasion, Rusty suddenly blurted into a ferocious bout of barking and snarling. Nathan would come out into the hall, but never found anything. He grew concerned for Rusty and took him to the vet, but the vet confirmed he was in good health. Meanwhile, Sailor, the younger dog, slept at the side of Mason's bed each and every night. The poor boy soon developed crippling nightmares that would torment him relentlessly, and Sailor seemed to sense it. Each time Mason would wake up screaming, Sailor would be there to try and comfort him. And that segues perfectly into our next rule. Rule number 4. Beware the nightmares. Young children are similar to animals in the way that they seem more perceptive to things that adults are not. This one can be difficult because there are many root causes of nightmares, with things like anxiety, depression, and other mental illnesses. The telltale sign is whether your child suddenly develops them soon after entering the home. Poor Mason had absolutely horrific dreams, and night after night he would be tormented by them. He often spoke of the blurry man that came to him while he slept and whispered terrible things. He even said that sometimes he would see the blurry man while he was awake, but never more than a quick glimpse, and always in the shadows or outside in the woods. Nathan and his wife worried that perhaps Mason was schizophrenic, but multiple doctors confirmed this was not the case. They tried giving Mason sleeping pills, various supplements, and burned incense to help him sleep more peacefully. It worked for a while, until Natalie started having them too. Rule number 5. Try to determine what kind of spirit you're dealing with. If you see flashes of a small child running through the halls at night, or orbs spiraling in the air, then odds are you're ethereal. Neighbor is rather benign. Some people even discover they rather enjoy life with a spectral roommate and find their antics to be rather interesting. Most believe that spirits who pass away before completing what their soul desired will become stuck in a sort of purgatory. Many are scared, confused, and angry, but some, primarily young children, seem to be almost jubilant at times. Most of these are unnerving, but altogether harmless. But then there's the other spirits. Rule number 6. If you or any member of your family develop inexplicable bruises, cuts, or lesions, then do not take them lightly. This should be a massive red flag and is a very bad sign. If you feel as though you are being attacked as you sleep and wake up with unexplained scratches or wounds, then just get the hell out of the house. Honestly, a malevolent spirit capable of inflicting physical wounds is not something to be trifled with. Odds are it's a demon, and honestly, that is the best case scenario. There are other non-Abrahamic related entities that could be responsible as well. They are very rare, but if encountered, well, I'm afraid even my handy set of rules won't be enough to stop them. Natalie and Mason suffered multiple scratch marks, wounds, and even a few bruises that almost looked like bite marks. Nathan's wife, Janelle, was also subjected to these attacks. The children's teachers at school began to notice and became quite worried for their safety. Obviously, their first thought was not paranormal, but rather that the children were being abused at home. Only when social services threatened to remove the children from his custody did Nathan finally agree to move them out of the house. Janelle and the kids moved in with her mother a couple of hours away, and Nathan was left all alone with the dogs. Rule number 7. Let people know what is going on. Yes, I know the thought of admitting to a close friend that you believe your house is haunted may be a daunting one, but it's usually better than the alternatives. The modern world rarely takes these claims seriously. We put ghosts in movies and video games, but when someone actually claims to see one, we aren't so quick to believe them. Technology and science have led us to believe we are safe. That is our folly, but it's also a topic for a different day. This is yet another rule that Nathan did not abide by. The worse that things got for him and his family, the more secluded he became. On numerous occasions, he phoned the police saying that he believed someone had broken in, but they never found evidence of it. Eventually, they even put him on a blacklist and warned that any further contact would result in legal trouble. Rather than tell his parents or brother or any of his friends what was going on, he retreated into himself. He became fidgety and paranoid at times refusing to return phone calls and texts from his loved ones. He just broke contact. And things only got worse. Rules 8 and 9 sort of belong in the same category, although one is a little more extreme than the other. Rule number 8. If you suspect something is up, it doesn't hurt to perform a cleansing. Like I said earlier, the modern world has little time to entertain the notion of ghosts and the supernatural, but that shouldn't ward you off. If you're unsure about whether your home is being haunted or not, then a routine cleansing can do wonders for you. I'm willing to bet there are mediums and priests in your town that can get the job done, even if you can't find anyone local. You can always just go online and find instructions for yourself. It's not as effective that way, but it's better than nothing. Rule number 9. If you're really feeling as though you are in danger, get someone to perform an exorcism. It's the step that no one wants to take, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Priests and spiritual leaders are your go-to for these kinds of things. Even if you yourself are not religious, these people honestly do know how to help. There's some evidence that Nathan was attempting to do this, but it's unknown why exactly it didn't work out. Maybe he second-guessed himself and thought he could handle it, or maybe his ego took control once again. Nathan had been collecting evidence for a while and had amassed quite a stash of clues. He had audio recordings which relayed banging on the walls and footsteps in the attics. He took multiple videos, but none of them really showed anything except for the last one. But by that point, it was too late. In his journal, he also wrote that he experienced items in the house levitating on several occasions, but sadly, he had no recorded proof of this. Rule number 10. The big one. Whatever you do, don't try to antagonize the spirit. This should really go without saying, but angrily challenging the spirit or daring it to manifest is a really bad idea. But as you may have guessed, Nathan and his unlimited stream of testosterone decided to do just that. He got really drunk one night and began ruminating on all that had been happening. Nathan was always a skeptic, but even he couldn't ignore the psychological impact on his family, whether it was imagined or not. He realized his relationship with his children and wife were being heavily strained, and his new house had become a place of hostility. This made Nathan very angry. So Nathan stood up and shouted at his empty house for the spirit to come forth and face him. He was met only with silence, and so he shouted again. Never once did the spirit answer his call. After a few more verbose challenges, he broke into a bout of laughter, probably believing himself to look ridiculous. Apparently not everyone who was watching felt the same, though. Nathan managed to stumble into bed not long after and was out cold within a couple minutes. Nathan had kept a security camera in his room in hopes of capturing proof, and that night he found something. At around 2:13 a.m., Nathan is seen beginning to stir in his sleep. In the security video, he grunts and speaks briefly, but the words were unintelligible. Suddenly his eyes sprung wide open in the bed and began glancing around the room. Nathan appeared to be struggling, but his body didn't move. It is believed he was suffering an episode of sleep paralysis which left him temporarily paralyzed. His eyes continued to dart rapidly around the room. Then something happened that no one who saw the video could explain. The bedroom door slowly rolled open, but the darkness of the hallway was all-consuming. Nathan's chest began frantically pumping up and down, and his eyes stretched wide open. Something was then seen moving in the hall. It could have been chalked up to a trick of the light at first, but then a hand was seen reaching through. It was gnarled and spindly, like the wretched, malformed appendage from some abyssal denizen. The figure slowly sauntered through the doorway, its tall, dark silhouette nearly grazing the top of the door frame. It had no definite features, appearing only as a hooded, humanoid individual. No eyes or face, just a shadow made corporeal from Nathan's deepest nightmares. Poor Nathan was heard mumbling and whimpering frantically, but in his paralyzed state he was unable to fight back or flee. He could do nothing but watch in absolute horror as the thing approached him. It stopped at the foot of his bed and just stared at him for about a minute. Nathan continued to hyperventilate and didn't appear blink once during the entire ordeal. The thing then finally moved closer. It then leaned down only a couple inches away from his face and appeared to whisper something. It was too quiet for the mic on the camera to pick up, but needless to say, it did not make Nathan feel any better about the situation. Suddenly the thing lashed out with its twisted hands, constricting like pythons around Nathan's throat. In his paralyzed state, he couldn't even struggle against his shrouded attacker. Within a minute, Nathan's chest stopped moving, and his eyes fell still. The entity retracted its hands and just stared at him for about a minute. Then, as if taunting those who would see the footage, it looked directly into the camera. It whispered something again, but again it was too quiet to discern what it was. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it waltzed out of the room and vanished back into the darkness. Nathan was found by his wife Janelle a few days later, and she called the police. After an autopsy, Nathan was determined to have died via strangulation, much as what was shown in the video. Cops scoured the premises and found footprints from the intruder. However, the footprints were soon matched to a pair of Nathan's own boots. The police, of course, were not so quick to believe that Nathan was simply killed by supernatural forces. They conducted interviews with neighbors, friends, and family members, but none of them seemed capable or motivated enough to have done it. There were no signs of breaking and entering, and nothing had been stolen from the home. They came to me and conducted an interview as well. But of course that was a futile effort, sure. The fact that Janelle was my ex-girlfriend was reason enough to suspect me, but I quickly dissuaded their accusations. Nathan was my friend, despite him not really being a good friend. What kind of friend bones your girlfriend behind your back anyway? I'm not bitter about it, though, at least not as far as the police are concerned. My alibis were solid, and that's good enough for them. This brings us to my final rule. Rule number 11. Make sure you exhaust all other options before coming to the conclusion that your house is in fact haunted. If only Nathan had taken a little more time to investigate his home and himself more thoroughly, then maybe he'd still be alive today. Maybe he would have found the many wireless speakers hidden in his attic to play the sounds of knocking. Maybe he would have found the patches in his air ducts that leaked mild doses of hallucinogenic drugs into his home. Maybe he would have detected the dog whistle alarm that caused his dogs to react so strangely. If he bothered to check himself, he may have found trace amounts of succinylcholine, a paralyzing toxin that once ingested, will leave the person immobile yet conscious to all pain it would have been difficult to find, as even coroners do not normally test for the substance unless specifically requested. No matter how you really slice it, this entire ordeal really comes back to Nathan himself. If only he had been a better person, had not constantly demeaned his peers at every turn. If only he hadn't been so stubborn and proud. If only he hadn't gone behind my back and boned my ex-girlfriend, thus ruining our future and sending me into the spiraling depths of crippling depression, then maybe I would have helped him. So you may be wondering, is this my confession? No, of course not. This is only my list of suggestions and rules for how things may have turned out differently for Nathan and his family. These are all hypothetical explanations and are in no way to be considered incriminating evidence to be used in court against me or anyone else for that matter. Besides, if this really was a confession, then that would make anyone who read it an accessory to murder, and we certainly wouldn't want that. I hope you can understand that, and I do hope that we can trust each other in this regard. After all, I have really good software for tracing IPs, and the modern web makes it incredibly easy to access them. We wouldn't want your house to suddenly become haunted, now would we? Story 3. A strange device. My name is Erica Stanton. You need to understand why I am posting this. The following are replicas of the posts that a friend of mine by the name of Alex Garvey made on a comics forum he both spent time on together. The posts were made in one of the general chat sections of the site. Both posts were swiftly taken down soon after they had been posted. I was in the process of replying to the second when it was taken down so could copy and paste the whole text, which I decided to do given how strange it was. The first 2 lines are from the first post as best I remember them. The wording may not be exactly right, but it's as close as I can get it. I need to write this down. I need to write this down before it. There is a gap of 4 hours between this post and the next. It happened again. I don't even remember hitting the button to submit that first post. The gaps in my memory are getting worse. It all started with my friend's husband. Elena had been married to Nolan for a while, since before I met her. In fact, they were both the nicest people you could hope to meet, though Nolan was a little shy around new people, kept to himself mostly, didn't talk much, but when you got to know him you saw that he had a good heart, would always make time to do little acts of kindness for people, even those he didn't know. Whenever he passed any homeless on the street, he'd always give them a few bucks, always happy to be the first to offer a ride home to friends who needed it and to be the designated driver when we were having a few drinks. That kind of thing. Anyway, one day, while I was talking to Elena, she told me that Nolan had started acting weird. Ever since he brought that ugly thing home, she said. Now, this kind of piqued my curiosity, so I asked her what she was talking about. She explained that about 2 weeks previously Nolan had come home after a long day at the office with something under his arm she'd never seen before. It had looked, she said, like a laptop, but a laptop that had been partially dismantled, taken apart in random sections, and there were various extra bits that didn't seem to do anything, wires and things plugged into it that she didn't recognize. She'd asked about it, and he'd simply replied that it was for work. Nolan worked in computer programming, so this seemed like a reasonable enough explanation, and she'd not thought much of it until a few days later. That was when she came home from shopping to find him just sat at the thing, staring at a bright blue screen. Occasionally he would type a few things into it, just gibberish as far as she could tell. Random letters and numbers in no real sequence. Then he'd stare at the screen until a line of the same would appear in reply, which she guessed must mean that it was connected to the net, except that she noticed later that day, when Nolan was still typing away, that the modem was switched off. She told me that this had been going on for a while now, and that whenever she tried to talk to Nolan about it, he just looked confused for a few moments, like he genuinely didn't even know what she was referring to when she asked about the device. Then he would just go back to saying that it was for work and wouldn't talk any more about it. This sounded seriously strange to me, so I asked her if she would be able to snap a pic of the screen while he was typing, using her iPhone or something, and then send me it. I told her how it sounded almost like Nolan and whoever he was talking to were communicating in some kind of code, and that a friend of mine was kind of a genius at cracking those things. She agreed, clearly concerned about her husband. She told me that he had been increasingly distant a lot of the time, followed by moments when he was almost too outgoing, not the usual shy man she knew. She looked genuinely worried about him, so I got the feeling that this wasn't just someone making a big deal over nothing, that there might be something wrong here. We got a photo of the screen with a line of code on it a few days later, and I and my friend Jack got to work trying to decipher it. Well, he did most of the work, to be honest. Okay, all the work, but I supervise. It took him a while, but finally he figured it out. What he found really didn't make much sense to me. Nolan's line of code read waiting. The reply from whomever he was talking to read were only white for the remainder of the day. There was an acknowledge from Nolan, and then that was it. When I told Elena about this, she seemed even more unsettled by the whole thing. She told me that soon after she'd taken that picture, Nolan had indeed got up, gone to the bedroom, and changed into an all-white outfit, white shoes, socks, pants, and a shirt with a white belt. He normally preferred darker colors, black and gray mostly, so she'd taken note of it as being odd, and ours still was, that she honestly couldn't remember seeing the outfit he was wearing in their cupboard at any point before. This went on for a while. Nolan would act oddly, behaving or speaking in ways that weren't normal for him. He would often seem distant or distracted, and started coming home late more and more often. At one point he came home with cuts all over his hands, like scratch marks of some kind. He didn't seem to know how he'd gotten them. Something else that troubled her was the way the device never seemed to run out of power. Over the weekend it would be on 24/7s, but it was never plugged in to charge. It simply kept on running throughout the day, whatever battery it ran on never running out of juice, and no matter what room of the house he was in, when a line of code appeared on the screen, Nolan would come running, like Pavlov's dog at the sound of the bell. It was a week later that Elena called me, in tears and sounding frantic. She told me that Nolan had disappeared. She'd woken up in the middle of the night, and he'd been gone. She'd tried his phone, and there had been no answer. She called the office, their friends, his relatives, her relatives, nothing. She'd called the police. but they said that not enough time had passed to report him as missing, and she'd said that when she'd come down into the living room, that damn thing had been set open on the table, the blue screen casting its dim light against a sofa. It looked like someone had been sitting in it until recently. I and Jack offered to take a look at the device to try and see if there was anything on there that could give some hint as to what the hell was going on here. She was so desperate for some clue, any clue as to what had happened to Nolan, that she agreed, and we picked it up from her place the next day. The police wouldn't do anything until he'd been missing for a few days anyway, so we figured we would take a crack at it, and if we couldn't find anything, we'd hand it over to them when they began officially searching for Nolan. If he hadn't come back before that, of course. We found that every interaction between Nolan and whoever he had been talking to was viewable simply by hitting the up key and scrolling up through the various lines of code. When it finally wouldn't go up any further, we figured this was the start, or as close to it as possible, and so Jack got to work translating while I wrote down what he said. I didn't know what we were going to find. I don't think there's any way either of us could have guessed. The first message was simple. It read, "Hello, Nolan, please stand by." It then said, when asked about this device, you are to say only that it is for work. We shall supply further instruction if necessary. The next one was presumably from his unknown contact as well. It read, eat only vegetables today. Another instruction. Jack went on to translate the next. Nolan would indicate that he was at the device with a simple "I am here," and then an order would follow. Slow down by 5 miles at the first green light you see after work. Kiss your wife only on the cheek for the next 24 hours. Do not smile until told otherwise. I jotted them down, wondering what on earth all this was. Nolan had been having some kind of kinky master slave affair behind his wife's back. Was this part of some really weird reality show he'd been taking part in? Some kind of hidden camera stunt? What the hell was all of this? Then Jack went quiet. He swallowed hard, and he read the next instruction. Eat a child's skin. I turned to look at him, and at this point I was fucking terrified. This had been creeping me out the more we'd gone on, and I genuinely thought and hoped that this had to be him messing with me. I even said you made that one up, and I wanted it to be in a casual, joking kind of way. It came out more like I was pleading with him, begging him to tell me he'd made it up. From the look on his face, either he hadn't, or he was a much better actor than I'd ever thought he was. The next instructions we translated were more mundane, nonsense orders about what to wear, how fast to walk, what route to take to work, what to eat. I almost made myself believe that one had been a mistranslation, that Jack had gotten it wrong. Then he read out the next one. Remove the eyes and tongue of the first homeless man you see today. Now, I'm pretty sure most people would be creeped out by that. But me. I wasn't just unsettled. I was feeling physically sick, because I could remember reading a news story not long ago about a brutal slaying of a man believed to be one of the various homeless that occupied the city. He'd been found in a shop doorway in a pool of blood with his eyes gouged out and his tongue removed. The remaining instructions were all mostly more everyday ones. Not that it mattered at this point. Some morbid curiosity made us press on, though, and scattered throughout were ones like strike the second stray animal you see before 6 p.m., and destroy the third vending machine that you walk past. Then came the final line of text. It simply read, we are coming. Wait outside for collection." And then it stopped. That was the last message that Nolan had received. The night he vanished from his home, Jack and I had no goddamn idea what to do with all this. This hadn't answered our questions. It had raised even more. What the hell was this thing? Who was Nolan talking to? Was this some sick joke, some kind of ridiculously elaborate prank that he had pulled on us? Jack said he had to get a drink and headed to the fridge while he grabbed us some beers. I glanced at the device, staring at the glowing blue screen, and that's when I noticed all the text that had been there before had vanished, just gone, leaving the screen completely blank. A new line of code appeared, and somehow, and I have no idea how, I could read it. "Hello, Alex, please stand by." That was 3 weeks ago. Jack has just disappeared off the face of the earth, and I don't know what scares me more. That I don't know what happened to him, or that I think some part of me does. I know that I get instructions from that thing regularly. I have whole hours, even days of my life, that are just one big blank where I can't remember a single damn thing that I've done. I've got bruises and scratches all over me. I come home some nights, and I'm wearing different clothes than what I left in, and my old clothes are gone. There are faint stains in the boot of my car, and a horrible smell. My head hurts all the time, and when I sleep I see something. When I wake up, I can't remember what, but I know it was bad. My body feels different. Everything feels wrong. Everything feels strange. I think the post ended here. I've not heard from or seen Alex since then. I don't know where he is, but I think I'm going to find out. Remember how I told you that it was important you know my name? I went to Alex's apartment about a week after we lost all contact. The door was unlocked, and in his bedroom, on the desk, was what looked like a weird laptop with a blue screen. 2 new lines of text appeared on it, written in a code I shouldn't have been able to read. "Hello, Erica, please stand by." Story 4. White Christmas. Living in Lower Alabama, we rarely receive snow. I spent most of my life wishing for a white Christmas that never came. I have only seen snow twice in my 33 years here. I always wanted to share that with my 2 boys. I just knew that they would love to play in it. Now I find myself staring out my window at the mounds of that icy precipitation surrounding my home, regretting every wish I had ever made for a snow-covered Christmas. When I think about it, it really started in summer. Our summers are always hot and extremely humid, but that year it was even more unbearable. We steadily saw temperatures of well over 100 degrees, and everyone I knew begged for relief. The heat wave lasted all the way until the week before Halloween. Then suddenly a massive hurricane spawned in the Gulf of Mexico. The weather forecaster for our local news frequently referred to it as a monster. Looking back, I would believe it was more of a demon that brought hell with it, but a much different one than I had read about in the Bible. The storm passed, leaving devastation for miles around. It had affected every state within the Southeast, but Florida most of all. Help was sent from various utility companies, government aid agencies, and even regular citizens to help with the relief. And when I say various, I mean from every state in our region. It was amazing to see the effort put forth to help the people that had lost everything. I am sure a lot of us thought that was the worst it could get. I wish that had been true, but that was when the rain started. As November came, we felt the first droplets in our tiny town. It was an odd occurrence, but not odd enough to raise any eyebrows. I mean, how bad could a couple days of rain be? Right. The problem came when days turned into weeks and low-lying areas became flooded. Homes in towns nearby were washed away in a matter of hours once the levees broke. My wife, Susan, constantly thanked God that our house was nestled on a high elevation among trees. I found myself thinking the same thing, but God had nothing to do with what happened. No God I could ever believe in any way. The week of Thanksgiving, the rain finally subsided, and I am sure that was something everyone would say they were thankful for. The problem was, what remained was the cold. That, in itself, was not strange, but the severity of it was we saw temperatures close to freezing for the following week, and that was something we rarely saw until late January or early February. My oldest son, Jacob, began singing that silly song by Bing Crosby. My wife beamed at the thought of them seeing snow on Christmas Day. The foolish child in me felt the same. The boys will finally get to see snow, Paul, Susan squealed. I know. I can't wait to see Tommy waddling in it. I responded. Those words ring in my head even now. I have to fight back tears when I think of just how stupid I had been. We were so preoccupied with setting up decorations and buying presents that we were oblivious to what was happening all around us. The snow actually started falling the first week of December. It was up several inches within the first day. It was amazing to see at first, but when it kept coming, some people became worried. If you have never been in the South when it snows, you probably would not understand. You see, we are not prepared for that kind of weather. Everything shuts down. People stay home and rarely go out driving. I know it sounds ridiculous to anyone else, but that is what happens. It just kept coming. My wife and I had let the boys play in the fresh powder originally, but when it had gotten so high that I could barely walk in it freely, we decided it was best to keep them indoors. Hardware stores had started bringing in snow shovels to help clear paths, something that you rarely found in our town. I bought one of the last ones on the shelf. As people scrambled to manage the icy foreign invader, the situation seemed to become worse. As small flurries became near blizzards, my wife stayed glued to the news and weather broadcasts. It appeared the northern states had almost been buried in the frigid powder. The president had actually issued a state of emergency, urging people in the northern portion to evacuate south. That was when I finally started to be concerned. These people had been told to come south, but our situation was hardly any better. The weatherman stopped trying to be accurate. His predictions of an end to the madness never came. The temperatures continued to drop, and it was not long before we saw them go from 0 to negative digits. It was unheard of in my state for it to be that cold, and people were getting afraid. Plumbing fixtures began to burst from frozen pipes, and people were left without water until they could thaw. Our world had become a freezer in a few weeks, and none of us were prepared for it. My family found themselves wearing our thickest clothing even inside. It felt like no matter how high I set the thermostat, it was not enough. We should have left then. By Christmas, we had no power, and utility companies had stopped trying to traverse the harsh conditions to repair downed lines. Local officials had abandoned emergency protocols to save themselves. We began hearing rumors of our neighbors attempting to head further south into Florida. Susan suggested the same, but I reminded her of the destruction still left from the hurricane. I was afraid we would be worse off without shelter, so I made the decision to hunker down in our home. I cleared a path to the fireplace that had only been used for decoration and set to the task of getting a fire going. If it was not such a dire situation, my wife would have found amusement in me attempting something like that. I had never even seen someone use a fireplace, let alone light one. After several attempts, we were able to burn what little wood that was readily available near our home. My family and I huddled around it as if it were going to save us from the fate that waited outside. The whiteness had engulfed our home. The mounds had risen above the windows. Breaking some of them, I was forced to reinforce each one to keep the cold out. We sealed every crack or crevice that could possibly let out the heat and tried to remain together. My wife wrapped our children in blankets and pulled them close. The boys did not understand, and we were afraid to tell them how serious the situation was. The fear that rested on my wife's face was enough to keep me from ruining what could be our last Christmas. We still attempted to have a big dinner, despite our ability to effectively cook. I also learned how to cook within a fireplace for the first time. It would have been an interesting experiment if it had not been essential for our survival at the time. We gave up on the idea of turkey or ham, but we had always had a decent stock of canned food. It was a habit I had picked up from my grandparents. I often wondered how they were faring during all of this, but I had my immediate family to worry about. Our world had been plunged into an endless sea of white. I even had nightmares of the stuff that Christmas Eve. My children normally woke me early on Christmas morning, but when my eyes fluttered open, I assumed it was still night. The house was so dark that I could barely see my wife lying next to me. I slowly rose from my bed, still completely clothed, and nudged Susan awake. The house had become far colder than it should have. Then Anne and I immediately headed for the fireplace. The fire had gone out at some point, so I ran for the back door, pulling on my boots. My aim was to gather more wood to get the fire going again, but as soon as the door cracked open, I was pelted with a mixture of snow and ice. It stung my face, and I cursed at the door while trying to shut it again. Our home had been buried in the vicious powder, and I finally understood why no light permeated the windows. My watch read 9 o'clock, but it felt much earlier. Susan stumbled into the living room, asking what I was doing. I told her what time it was, and confusion filled her eyes. She went for the window and was greeted with what I already knew. I do not remember ever seeing her quite so afraid, and the feeling was mutual. I buried my emotions down, though, knowing I had to be strong for my family. I told her to go check on the kids while I tried to get the fire going again. She disappeared down the hall, and I made my way to the dining room. The table and chairs had been passed down through my family for generations, but I knew it would have to be sacrificed. I set to dismantling the wooden chairs first, but was stopped by the sound of my wife's scream. I rushed through the hall, listening to the awful sound echo in my ears. I could feel tears forming in my eyes, but I pushed them back as I rounded the corner. She was grasping the door frame of our children's room. We had put them together so that Jacob could help keep an eye on Tommy. I could see her body shaking as she stared into the room. Tears rolled over her cheeks as I turned to see inside. The window of their room had given to the weight of our captor, despite my attempt at strengthening it. Snow had buried the bows in the night, and that was when I noticed the flakes of white all over my wife's hands. Susan had attempted to uncover them, and I could see the pale blue skin of their faces huddled together in Jacob's bed. It would have been a sweet scene if it were not for their skin tone, something Susan would have taken a picture of, but this was not that scene. I pulled Susan away as I tried to hold back the sick feeling in my stomach. I felt as though I could release what little Christmas dinner I had in me on the floor at any moment. Soon her sobs subsided, but when I looked into her eyes, she simply looked numb. I had never seen her this way, and I tried to break her from this trance she seemed to be in. But she said nothing. Her eyes would not even turn my direction when I spoke. Something had broken inside Susan that morning, and I do not blame her. I sat her next to the fireplace and wrapped her in a blanket while I returned to the dining room. The polished wood did not want to burn, but I was determined to give us warmth. So I did not stop until we had fire. I made it a point to ask Susan to stay by the fire while I returned to the boys' room. I could not leave them that way, but when I reached the door I found myself pausing just outside. I felt the warm and salty spakes across my cheeks before I even saw them. I slowly stepped inside and slid gloves over my hands. I finished clearing away the snow and noticed why they had not simply come to our room. The wood I had used to seal off the window had struck my oldest first. It left a gash near his temple that would have knocked a grown man unconscious. I could only imagine his 10-year-old body had not lasted long after. Tommy had obviously woken after. His tiny form clung to his big brother like a teddy bear. I internally cursed myself for not putting them to bed with us that night, but I knew it was too late for that kind of thinking. I removed their bodies and wrapped them in blankets before placing them in the guest room. I took one final look at their tiny bedroom, a place that had held so much joy previously. I imagined the two of them playing and sometimes bickering. My lips tried to curl upward, but they could not. My eyes drooped to the floor as I turned away and shut the door. I have not returned to that room since, and I doubt I will. I just returned to the living room in hopes of comforting Susan. But when I got there, the blanket was all that remained by the fire. A quick search of the house revealed that the back door had been opened and a tunnel had formed in the frigid wall on the other side, leaving the floor inside covered in snow. I tried to follow Susan's footsteps, but eventually they disappeared behind a solid wall of that cursed white. I could only imagine her frantically digging through it, and the sound of what was above coming down upon her body. I tried to dig into it myself in search of her body, but the layer that remained was frozen solid. It was like digging my hands into cement, and I knew that Susan would not have survived it, even if my mind did not want to believe it at the time. I found myself picking at it with tools anyway, feeling as though I had nothing left to do. I do not know how much I cried while working at that pointless task, but I do know it started to freeze to my cheeks. I did not stop until my arms could not lift again, and that is when I sat among the snow and stared at what my world had become. I lost track of how long I sat there or when I decided to come back to the fire. I do remember when I started burning the Christmas gifts and how hard a choice that had been. I opened each one slowly and savored the idea of the children playing with it for the first time. I could even see Susan standing over them with her camera in hand. She would be giving her biggest smile and snapping away to save each memory. She loved taking pictures, but what I had to do did not need to be captured on any sort of film. I started to feel the numbness that night, that same numbness that overtook Susan earlier that day. It was as cold as the snow that surrounded me, and all I could think was this had been my fault. I should have escaped with my family when I still had the chance. I do not know if it was pride, ignorance, or both, but the guilt was too much. It consumed me and took away everything this holiday was supposed to be about. I started writing this in hopes that someone reads it. I do not know what has happened to the rest of the world, only what has happened to me. I do not know how long I can survive here. My food is running low and I have run out of things to burn. I cannot even say for certain how long I have been here since my watch has stopped turning and I still cannot see the sun. I think I will try to dig myself out tomorrow. And if you do find this, know I did not simply give up. I just wish I had done this sooner. I am so sorry, Susan, Jacob, and Tommy. You deserve better than this. I hope you can forgive me. Sincerely, Paul Richardson. Story 5, STOP 115. I smelled the coal smoke before I opened my eyes. For a moment I was again in the shop where my grandfather repaired motors. I used to sit by his old stove and watch him work. Hannah, what's the piston firing order of a small block Chevrolet? He'd ask, and I'd recite 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2. He'd laugh and toss me one of the snack-size Hershey bars he kept in his toolbox. But the lurching and pitching, where was I? Opening my eyes took more effort than it should have. My head felt leaden, leaning against something cool and smooth. Finally, I cracked my eyelids. Scenery whizzed by outside. Lush, green mountains, a clear blue sky. Where was I? I couldn't think. I struggled to raise my head, but it immediately fell back against my seat. Was I on a train? I want my mama. A little voice whimpered, and I managed to raise my head to look at the seat across from me. A girl of about 4 lay on it, sucking her thumb. She seemed as lethargic as I felt. She also looked familiar, but I couldn't think. My head throbbed, and I felt queasy. Someone moved swiftly down the aisle. A lady in a bright blue uniform. She knelt beside the girl. It's okay, sweetie. You'll see your mama soon. I tried to get her attention. She whipped her head around, and I cried out. Her eyes were black as coal, but I blinked and it was gone. She looked at me with concern in her sky-blue eyes. Are you okay? She asked. My head. It's probably the smoke from the train, she said. Then she walked away. Someone groaned to my right. A blond guy about my age slumped forward. He turned and squinted at me. Jake, I whispered. I am Jake, he said, as if it had just occurred to him. What? I don't know. He closed his eyes. I remembered him. Somehow, a number 7 on a black jersey. I pictured him at a locker helping me open mine, and I knew without being able to see it clearly that the baseball cap he wore backwards had a Red Sox symbol on it. Looking beyond him, out his window, I tried to recall where I'd been just before the train. I'm gonna be sick, he said, and struggled to his feet. He made it halfway down the aisle before the lady in blue stopped him. Please return to your seat, she said. Restroom, he muttered. I'm sick. It will pass, she said cheerfully, and tried to pull him back. He shook her hand off and lurched down the aisle At the end, he disappeared into a door to his left. The lady in blue looked anxious. She glanced at the other passengers, but no one else seemed strong enough to stand. Lips pursed, she waited for him. Finally, the door opened and he staggered out, pale and red-eyed. He looked annoyed to see the lady in blue waiting. He turned as if to go through the door too. Another car, and she freaked out. "Stop," she cried. "You can't go in there." She almost shoved him down in her attempts to get between him and the door. He lifted his eyebrows and held up his hands in surrender. Then he headed back down the aisle. Instead of taking his previous seat, he fell into the seat next to me. "Please return to your seat," she said, and he ignored her. "Young man, where are we?" he demanded. "Where are we going?" She strode to the first seat of the car, where a man in the same type of blue uniform sat. He turned to look at us, and they whispered behind their hands. "What's going on?" Jake said. "I can't remember. My head hurts, mine too." "Do you think we were drugged?" He looked at me, then at the little girl in the seat in front of us. "But why, the last thing I remember is Mr. Greeley yelling at me. He yelled at you for sleeping in detention." "That's right, you're Hannah. I have a bad feeling," he said. "We need to get off this train." The two employees still watched us. Jake lowered his head and said, "These kids, they're from our school, and the younger ones." He tipped his head at the girl. "I think they're from the daycare next to our detention room." I looked at the girl, surprised. "Mrs. Campbell's daughter, Allie." A voice came over the loudspeaker. "Approaching stop 105. All passengers remain seated unless a service member directs you otherwise. Only people with tickets for stop 105 will be allowed to disembark there." "Do you have a ticket?" Jake asked. Before I could look, the two service members in our car moved quickly down the aisle, closing the blinds over the windows. Jake tried to stop the man from closing ours. "Leave ours open, please," he said, and the man closed it anyway. Jake reached for it, and the man grasped his wrist. "Don't touch that," he said, and for a moment his eyes flashed black. "There are things on this journey you do not want to see. Stop 105 holds many of these things. In fact, you do not wish to see any of the stops until we get to stop 110. He smiled and said, "Enjoy your ride." We watched him walk away. "Did you see that?" Jake kissed his eyes. "Yes," I whispered. "And hers were the same earlier." I thought I imagined it. The train lurched to a stop. "No one from our car is disembarking at this stop," the lady in blue announced with a smile. "Perhaps you should close your eyes and nap. It will help the time pass." She took a blanket from the overhead compartment and tucked it around me. Jake refused the one she offered him. "Rest your eyes, honey," she said. "I'll wake you when we reach your stop." A nap. I still felt so groggy, and my head wouldn't stop pounding. Maybe if I closed my eyes for just a minute. "Stay awake." Jake nudged me with his knee. "We can't go to sleep." I opened my eyes and noticed Allie was asleep, snoring softly. All over the car, passengers slept. Some faces I knew. Others were still hazy. "Hannah?" Jake whispered. "Do you hear that?" I did. It sounded like wolves howling, or moving quicker than I was capable of at the moment. Jake reached across me and opened the shade. What had been sunny and lush only moments ago was dark and barren. People lurched into the darkness. Then yellow lights appeared. It took me a second to realize they were eyes. Something jumped at our window, and I screamed. I had a flash of scraggly black fur and yellow eyes as it slammed against the glass. Then the man in blue was there, yanking on the shade. "I told you not to touch that." He yelled. "What the hell was that?" Jake cried. "Where are we? Where are you taking us? To a nicer place than this? If you will listen to the rules," the man snapped, looking rattled. He stood right beside us until the train chugged in motion again. Along with the howls, I imagine I heard screaming. Jake took my hand. His fingers fell icy in mine, and I looked down. His fingers were pale, the nail beds cherry red. "So were mine. So were Allie's. We have to get off this train," Jake said. His reddened eyes and lips stood out against his pale skin. "You don't look so good," he said. I was sleepy. Every time my head dipped, Jake squeezed my fingers. I dozed somewhere between stops, 106 and 107, but Jake kept bringing me back. The two employees in blue still stared at us. Finally, the man came toward us. "I need to see your tickets, please." He didn't even try to hide the black flash of his eyes when he said, "Now." I dug through my pockets and produced a yellow ticket from my jacket. It simply read "Stop 115. Jake's search through his pockets yielded nothing. "What can I tell you, man?" he said. "If you'd tell me how I got on this damn train, I might know where my ticket is." The lady in blue approached, and the man hissed, "He doesn't belong here." "I told you so." Her eyes widened and her mouth gaped. "Impossible. He's too strong," the man said. "He cannot stay on here." The woman frowned at us and pulled the man away. We watched them engage in an animated conversation. "They're gonna kick me off," Jake said. "I want to go with you," I said. "Please don't leave me." "I won't," he promised, and squeezed my fingers. "I don't know where we're going, but I don't trust them." He glanced out the window. "I used to like trains when I was a kid. This one seems kind of slow. I figure we're doing about 80 miles per hour. If we try to jump at this speed, we're probably dead. But have you noticed how much it slows when we're approaching a stop? We have to be close to stop 109 now. Maybe we should take our chances, jump when we get close." But he said we don't need to look outside before we get to 110. "What if those creatures are there? What will we do?" Jake looked up at the couple in blue that was still talking and looking at us. A third, large man in blue had joined them. "I don't think we have much choice. I think they're about to kick me off. Are you going with me or staying here?" My hand felt cold and clammy in his, but I squeezed his fingers. "I'm going." The voice over the loudspeaker announced we were approaching stop 109, and the train began to slow. Jake moved fast. He jerked me up and half dragged me down the aisle. I glanced behind me and saw the people in blue running toward us, but he'd caught them off guard. He reached the door in the back of the car and threw it open. Hand in hand, we jumped into nothingness. I awoke to the beeps and whir of machinery, cold, and the smell of pine disinfectant. Something covered my nose. I fumbled at it, only to feel a warm hand covering mine. I expected the lady in blue, but it was a different face that hovered over mine. My eyes burned when I recognized my mom. "Hannah," she cried. "Grant, get the nurse. She's awake." To me, she said, "Honey, just be calm. Leave your oxygen mask on. You're okay." She covered her mouth with her hands and her eyes shone with tears. "You're going to be fine. What happened? I gasped. The furnace at your school. There was a carbon monoxide leak. It hurt a lot of people before anyone realized what was happening, especially on the bottom level. Your classroom room, the daycare. She shook her head, but you're going to be okay. They found you in a doorway with some boy. The two of you made it outside before you collapsed. That's why you're alive, Jake, I whispered. Is he okay? My mother nodded. He is, and he's been asking for you. She left the room and I lay there, trying to remember what happened, trying to piece together some crazy dream about a train and workers with black eyes. My mother wheeled Jake into the room. He smiled at me from under the bill of his Boston Red Sox hat. Hey, you, he said, you scared me. Mom smiled and parked his chair by my bedside. I'm going to go grab a sandwich with your father. Let you to talk. What happened? I asked. He frowned. I don't remember much. They said there was a carbon monoxide leak. We were the only ones from that classroom who made it out alive. I remember holding your hand, trying to get to a door, but that's about all. I wanted to ask him about the train, but that would sound crazy, right? He shook his head. What's the last thing you remember? I remember Mr. Greeley yelling at you for falling asleep. I couldn't keep my eyes open. Jake said, I guess that the poison was already hitting me. I'm not sure how I even woke up enough to get out. He reached over and squeezed my hand. I looked down. Our hands were pale, and the nails were still red. I'd had a crush on him since 7th grade. I couldn't believe Jake Marlowe was here, holding my hand. I laughed. I dreamed about you. I dreamed we were on a train. You saved me from these weird, black-eyed train workers. Jake's already pale-face blanched. Train, he said. He pulled his hand from mine and rubbed his hands over his face, accidentally dislodging his hat. He grabbed it before it hit the floor. What the hell? He whispered and extracted something from the inside ridge of his cap. He held it up, and we both stared at it. It was a simple yellow ticket with the words Stop 115 printed in black letters. Story 6, Yellow Ledbetter. The land beyond the bridge had been in my family for generations. 44 acres of farmland. My father was as rooted to it as the oak tree in our front yard. Although he was sympathetic to my plight, he was certainly not going to move just because his daughter's college boyfriend had killed himself 2 miles down the road. Everyone had told me that it wasn't my fault. Travis was sick, but they hadn't seen the look on his face when I told him it was over, that I couldn't do it anymore. I'd left school and left him there because I'd been too afraid to deal with a situation that had grown steadily and unrelentingly worse. And he had chased me. My father thought he was drunk when he showed up, wild-eyed and disheveled, trampling my mother's buttercups in his bare feet on a soggy February afternoon. I wish he had been drunk or high. Both were temporary states, and like the schizophrenia that had begun its manifestation when he was only 16 years old. He just stood there, screaming my name, as my taciturn father first tried to reason with him, then threatened to call the cops. It was only when my father got his shotgun that I stepped onto the porch. Daddy, no. I cry, then turn to my lover of the past 3 years. Travis, you have to go. It's over. It's not over, he insisted, his tears melding with the misting rain. I need you. He took a step toward me, and my father pointed the gun at his chest. Travis paid him no mind at all. He took another step, and Dad cocked the gun. I'd never seen my father's face so pale, so grim. One hand gripped the barrel, and his finger paused on the trigger. I panicked and did the only thing I could think to do. Travis ran away from anger, a carryover from his childhood. I railed at him. "I don't love you any more. Leave me alone. Go." His face twisted in grief, and he clamped his hands over his ears. Then he ran straight down the middle of the road, leaving his battered black Sentra parked in the driveway. "Travis, no," I screamed, and jumped off the porch. My father threw down the gun and grabbed me, lifting me off my feet as I fought to get free, to chase Travis down and tell him I was sorry. "I didn't mean it, Mary. Call the police," Dad shouted, but my mom already had her phone in her hand. I'm not sure when he painted the message, before or after the confrontation, or where he'd gotten the paint. Graffiti on the abutment was nothing new. He might have even found a can there, left behind by some drunken teenagers. All I knew was that the paint wasn't even dry by the time the cops got there. I'd heard that little detail in a whispered conversation in town. Paint dripping down concrete, blood pooling on asphalt, red, the color of anger, the color of agony. Travis had scaled the grassy bank and climbed to the bridge 17 feet above. Then he'd jumped. The plunge had broken his neck. "I loved you, Steph," his last words to me. What a difference that one little letter made. That change in tense. Those four words burned behind my eyelids when I tried to sleep. I imagined him saying them, the hurt and recrimination in his voice. He had died in turmoil. Maybe that was why. He was haunting me. I didn't leave the house for 3 weeks, didn't attend his funeral. I couldn't take the whispers that I was the reason he'd done this, nor could I face his mother. The sight of those crushed flowers out the living room window devastated me. I remembered an English lit professor saying that buttercups bloom on the banks of one of the rivers of the underworld, to lift the spirits of the dead. Only I didn't think Travis had made that journey. I felt him right there with me. I noticed it on the radio first. Back in our apartment near school, Travis had an old guitar in the closet. Every once in a while, we'd go to the park and he'd bring it along. He'd say, "Got any requests? Pretty girl, anything you like, as long as it's yellow, Ledbetter or Sweet Home Alabama." We'd laugh, because those were the only 2 songs he knew how to play. In the weeks following his funeral, it seemed like every time I turned on the radio, I heard one of those songs. Pretty coincidental, considering how old they were. So I stopped listening to the radio. On the 3rd week, my mom and little sister coaxed me into going with them too. Look for Allison's prom dress. I knew my family was worried about me. I spent most of my time in my room. I forgot to eat. I just wanted to sleep, to escape my thoughts. But even in my dreams, he found me. No one thought to tell me about the spray-painted message. When I first saw it, it hit me like a punch in the throat. What? I wheezed and had the crazy thought that maybe no one could see it except me. Alarmed, my little sister stopped on the brakes, inciting a new level of panic. "Go," I tried to gasp. She didn't understand, but my mother did. "Allison, drive," she said, and my sister took off so fast we fishtailed. Tears stung my eyes and I couldn't breathe. What happened next rocked me. The radio blared to life, blasting Yellow Ledbetter. My sister said later she must have had the radio turned low and accidentally hit the volume button on her steering wheel. But neither of us believed that. The button was one that you had to push up and hold to increase volume. I saw her hands. I saw them. They never moved. My heart slammed in my chest, and I broke out in a sweat. I started shaking so hard my mom thought I was having a seizure. She was screaming at Allie and crawling over the seat to hold me. Instead of prom shopping, we went to the where they said it was a panic attack. They gave me a prescription for anxiety medication and sent us on our way. A couple of hours later, the medicine made me sleepy because I wasn't used to taking anything, but I was still awake when we went under the bridge again. It was dark this time, but there was a curve in the road just before the underpass. One moment, when the headlights hit the blood-red letters, "I loved you, Steph," all I could see was the grief on his face, see him clamping his hands over his ears, trying to shut out my hateful words. He had died thinking I hated him. It was too much to bear. The walls seemed to close in after that. I couldn't stand to be so close to the place where he died. I couldn't stand my family's worried looks and whispers. So I went back to school, back to the apartment Travis and I had shared. A fresh hell awaited me there. God, how it hurt to see all the pictures of us, smiling, kissing, hugging. We had been so happy once. He told me early on that he'd been diagnosed with schizophrenia as a teen, but it seemed to be well controlled with medication. If Travis hadn't told me, I never would have guessed. Not back then, anyway. He was so gentle, so generally happy and loving. We had nearly 2.5 perfect, passionate, wonderful years. But last September, he started acting strange. A waiter first drew his suspicion. We were at a bistro near campus, one we frequented for breakfast, when he leaned in and said, "I think that guy just put something in my food." "No way," I whispered. "We always tip well. Why would he do that?" Travis shrugged. Watching him, I think even then I saw something different in his blue eyes, a glint, a gleam. I'm not sure how to describe it, except to say that it later became maniacal. When the waiter set his plate in front of him, Travis didn't say anything. He just pushed his food around on his plate with his fork, staring at it. "Here," I said, and attempted to switch plates. "No," he shouted and knocked it from my hand. It clattered to the floor, splattering both of us with food. "Oh, God," he said, grabbing his napkin and trying to get the food off my sleeve. I'm sorry. Everyone was watching us. Travis grew more agitated. His cleaning became frenzied as he dabbed water on the napkin and scrubbed his pant leg. "Let's go," I said, a little unnerved. I threw some cash on the table and we left. The suspicions grew. Worse, a stranger passing on the street was spying on us. A professor was letting people read his papers behind his back, scrutinizing his thoughts. He stopped sleeping and would stay up all night. Cleaning, I didn't know what to make of it. I'd never seen him act that way, and I'll admit, I even searched for signs of drugs. Hesitantly, I brought up his schizophrenia and asked him when he'd seen his doctor last. Travis avoided my eyes and said, "It's under control. I don't need him." I wanted to call his mother, but I didn't even have her number. Travis didn't speak to her often. His childhood had been rough, chaotic. The few times I'd met her led me to believe that his mental illness might have been inherited from her. He was enrolled on scholarship. Travis was brilliant, but he started skipping classes and soon wouldn't go out at all. I didn't know what to do. One day I came home to find he'd taken all the mirrors off the walls. Souls could get trapped in them. He said he'd unplugged the TV and put it in the closet. We had a fight that night. Well, I fought because he ignored me. I begged him, then I threatened to leave him if he didn't see a doctor. No response. He sat on the couch, hugging his knees and rocking, staring at the spot on the wall where the TV used to hang. In the middle of the night, I woke to find his face hovering inches over mine. Startled, I screamed and shoved him. He caught me and pulled me against him, pressing his face against my breast like a child. "Please don't leave me," he sobbed. "I'm sorry for how I am. But I did leave. I was scared." Now all I could think as I boxed away his things was, "Look what you have done." In a stack of his mail, I found a letter from his insurance company. His mother had been terminated from her employment, and they'd both been dropped from her plan. I finally had my answer as to why he'd stopped his meds. I put away his clothes, all of our pictures. I boxed up everything, but I had no one to send it to, so I found myself sitting in an empty living room with only a couch and cardboard boxes stacked in every corner. I tried to stay gone most of the time because weird things happened at the apartment. One morning I woke up and found a framed picture of us sitting in the middle of the dining room table. I wasn't sure what scared me worse, the thought that a ghost had done it, or that I had done it and didn't remember. I spent most of my night sleeping on a couch at a friend's apartment. Angie was sympathetic and worried about me. I appreciated her friendship, but mostly I just didn't want to be alone. That's how I came to catch a ride with Jack that May after the semester ended. He was friends with Angie's boyfriend and lived about 15 minutes from my parents' house. I knew he was attracted to me, though I never encouraged it. He seemed to take my acceptance of a ride as interest, but it wasn't. Not at all. I just didn't want to ride under that bridge alone. As we drew closer to the bridge, my anxiety increased. I'd already taken to Xanax, and I had surreptitiously popped another half an hour ago. They weren't helping at all. My nerves were singing. I tried to push back another panic attack. He kept scanning the radio on, and I had to grit my teeth. I felt that the songs were speaking to me. Dead and Gone, Who's That Man, Hard Take Tonight, Country, Rock, Hip-Hop. I felt they were all Travis trying to communicate with me. "I loved you, Steph," Jack mused, as his headlights lit the graffiti on the wall. The opening chords of Sweet Home Alabama blared. The inside of the car went dark for an instant as we went under the bridge. Then Travis leaned forward from the back seat and spoke to me. "This is who you replace me with?" he asked, and I began to scream. "Jesus, what is it?" Jack shouted, but I didn't look at him. I clawed at the door handle. "Stop, what are you doing?" "Hey, doll," Travis said, "miss me." I tumbled out the car door and smacked the asphalt, somehow managing to avoid the tires. Jack screeched the car to a stop and jumped out. "What's happening?" he demanded, his face stark in the moonlight. "Are you okay?" "She's peachy," Travis growled behind him, advancing toward me. "Never missed a beat, did you, babe?" I screamed and scuttled backwards like a crab. "Don't come near me," I begged. In my peripheral vision, Jack lifted his hands, making a gesture of peace. But he wasn't the one I was focused on. The man moving toward me looked anything but peaceful. He looked enraged. Dimly, I heard Jack say, "I'm gonna go get help." Then he jumped in his car and slammed it in reverse. He nearly hit the abutment as he whipped it around. He roared off into the night, leaving me alone with my ghost. "He left you," Travis said with a sneer, "just like you left me." His words deflated me. I buried my face in my hands and cried. I didn't know my palms were bleeding until I felt something wet and sticky on my face and looked down to see them in the moonlight. "I'm sorry," I gasped. "I'm so sorry." His sneer evaporated, melting into a thin, grim line. "Not good enough. What do you want?" I asked, but I think I already knew. "I want you to feel what I felt that night. Alone, hopeless. That was how I'd felt since the day he died." I looked directly at him for the first time. He was wearing the same thing he'd worn the day he died, down to his bare feet. I could see his words, "I loved you," Steph, straight through him, like he was a projection on that grimy wall. "Okay," I said, and tugged off my shoes. Rocks dug into my heels, but I didn't care. The grass was cool and slick beneath my feet, but it was easier than I thought it would be to climb the embankment. Nothing was coming on the bridge. Nothing ever was these days. I stood in the road for a moment, feeling the wind whip my hair. Then I moved to the edge and stepped over the guardrail. I didn't look at him, but I felt Travis beside me. My toe was bleeding. I stared at it for a moment, thinking some crazy thought about how my mother would feel about me dying with dirty feet. The height made me dizzy. I swayed a little and almost fell right then. Honeysuckle perfumed the night air. "I wondered if you could smell when you were dead." I steadied myself and then held my arms open. "Why, is this what you want?" I whispered. I didn't think he'd answer me. Travis said, "No, stop. This isn't what I want." A tear slid down my face, then another one. "What do you want, Travis?" I looked at him then. He was close enough to touch, close enough that I should have felt his breath. His face bore the same anguished pain look it had the night he died. "I want to know I mattered to you," he cried. "I never mattered to anyone else. I thought I mattered to you." I turned to face him and nearly lost my balance. His eyes glowed an eerie blue in the moonlight. He reached out a hand to steady me, and it passed right through my arm. "I love you," I said. "Of course you mattered to me. You cut off my songs, you pack away my pictures. You didn't even come to my funeral." I gasped. "I couldn't see you like that, Han. No, it was my fault. I was just scared. I didn't know what to do that night." I don't know what to do now." We stood there in silence for a moment. Dimly, I thought I heard sirens. "I love you," I said. "I have always loved you." "Go home, Steph," he said softly, and then he disappeared. Broken, confused, I crossed back over the guardrail and gingerly made my way back down the embankment. I crossed over to the concrete wall and laid my palm against the words written in red. "I loved you, too," I whispered. Then I started walking down the center of the road. I made it almost a mile before the police picked me up. I spent a week in a psychiatric hospital where they diagnosed me with a mental breakdown. They put me on antidepressants and weekly therapy sessions. My sister took me to pick up some things from the apartment. I paid my rent up, but my family didn't want me to stay alone for a while. I took a box of pictures with me. Sometimes I'd spread them out on my bed and just relive those days, the days when he was mine and life was good. Sometimes my sister would sit with me and let me tell her stories about him. How we looked, I know I told her. The some of the same ones over, but I don't think she minded or judged me. She had loved Travis, too. This one, I'd say, tapping a frame photo of us. This was our first date. Travis sat beside me on the grass, his handsome face lit up in a grin that took my breath then, took my breath now. His battered old guitar lay beside him. We'd been at the park with friends, and he'd played Yellow, Ledbetter for me, and sang along. Sometime later, one of his friends had teased him about his singing voice. It was good enough, he replied with an embarrassed smile. He ducked his head, then grinned up at me as he reached to squeeze my hand. It kept her in my company. The bridge no longer scared me. The songs on the radio didn't scare me. They only made me miss him. I missed him more and more. I tried to act normal for my family, even for Travis, if he was watching, but the loneliness seared me. Nighttime was the worst. I missed his arms around me, missed his breath on the back of my neck as he snuggled against my back. I wore his old T-shirts to sleep in. Sometimes I caught a whiff of his scent, but after a while they smelled like me, not him. One beautiful, crisp October day, I was driving to the grocery store for Mom. As I approached the bridge, I slowed down, turned the radio up, and hit scan. No song greeting from Travis. It devastated me to think he was finally, forever slipping away from me. I pulled the car to the side of the road and parked. "Travis, can you hear me?" I asked, and hit scan again. Nothing meaningful. I reached under the seat and retrieved something in a paper bag that I had stolen from my dad's garage, a can of black spray paint. I walked up to the wall, traced my name with my fingers, and then wrote over the top of it, "I still love you." I took off my shoes and socks and left them on the side of the road in front of the car. The radio blared suddenly with the song "Don't," but I was already crossing to the embankment. Dimly, I heard static as it scanned on its own and landed on the song "Stop" and the name of love. I laughed and sang along. When I reached the top of the bridge and stood on that same edge, I felt at peace. I saw a movement from the corner of my eye and wasn't at all surprised to see Travis beside me, transparent in the late afternoon sunshine. Sadness pulled at his handsome face. "Don't look at me like that," I pleaded. "I miss you. I need you. Play our song." Faintly from the ground, I heard the faint strains of Yellow, Ledbetter. Then I jumped, asterisk, 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 asterisk. I woke up in the hospital a few hours later. My father had found me lying on the road beneath the bridge on his way home from work, like I'd curled up take a nap. There wasn't a scratch on me. I can't remember much after I jumped. Only hazy dreams of Travis holding me and telling me I had to go back, that it wasn't my time, telling me he'd never leave me. Nobody believed me when I told them I'd jumped, but I know I did. I also know Travis saved me somehow. Looking at my father's haggard face, I was glad he did. I held my dad's hand, shocked at how old and frail he suddenly seemed. I felt so ashamed. He would have never survived finding my dead body. I thought about a quote I'd seen somewhere about suicide not ending pain, but merely passing it on to someone else. For my family, I'll try to be strong. One day I know I'll see Travis again.